Hi. How's everyone doing? Good evening. Call the meeting to order at 6:31. And I need to get a motion for the approval of the minutes on December 19th, 2023. Motion? Second?
Second.
Any comments, questions, concerns, changes? Did anybody actually read them? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? All right, motion carries. And now we're going to go into a presentation. Before we do that, because we're running a little bit ahead of schedule, I don't know, I know you're going to be speaking later, but anything you want to talk about now? Just kick it off for you, Superintendent.
No, I've got a series of updates that are upcoming, which I can go over, and the mayor is not going to be here tonight because he's got a performance for one of his children, but I've been in close communication with him, and some of the updates are related to things he wanted to share as well. So it's good to see. Is this our first meeting in 2024?
Is it?
Yep.
Yes, it is.
Yep.
Happy New Year.
Okay.
What's the date? What's the date when you have to stop saying Happy New Year? Do we know that?
That's a responsibility of the co-chair.
Bob said St. Patrick's. All right. So we're gonna have a presentation about the Procurement 101, and Anthony Delaney's gonna lead us through that.
Should I just do it from here? Okay.
Whatever you.
Everyone can hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so I was asked to come up with a quick overview of some procurement terms, procurement steps, what we're in for in the coming months for this process. There are a number of procurement law, Mass General laws that touch procurement. These are the big four that you'll probably hear a lot. The most common one you generally hear, not in this procurement, but generally is Chapter 30D, which governs the procurement of most goods and services that do not fall under construction. Relevant to us will be things like furniture, appliances, but even the instructional materials that teachers use would fall under 30D. The big one for us is going to be Chapter 149, which governs building construction, also sometimes called vertical construction. Anything with four walls and a roof, or the systems of those buildings falls under 149. So HVAC, boilers, plumbing, all falls under that. Chapter 30, Section 39M is the horizontal construction piece, which will be less relevant to this project, but it would govern any playgrounds and play fields that were done. If we needed to build a road to get somewhere, it would fall under 39M. And Chapter 7C governs designers, and that includes both the OPM and the architect. Next up, we've got, did the contents of the text boxes not make it in? Okay, that flow chart is supposed to have little sub-steps in it. Oh, okay, my eyesight is terrible. Okay, so this is an overview of the steps as the MSBA outlines it. Yeah, we don't need to go over every single one, but you can also find this. You can find this in detail on the MSBA website, including a lot of step-by-step instructions.
Hold on one second. Lisa, do you have access to that? Do you have access to that?
Yes.
Do you have right now?
Yes.
I think it's important just to go through them.
Okay.
Just
sure.
Because this is a long process. It's going to be a long process, so you mind?
Anthony, if you
I
highlight
hate to
them,
put you on the spot.
if you highlight them, I might.
I'm not controlling this.
Lisa has it right
Yeah, if you highlighted it,
Yeah.
just like select the text.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you had the
Oh,
actual.
oh,
I thought
okay.
you were controlling it.
She is.
Oh,
I
sorry.
am, but you want me to go to the MSBA website?
No. I thought you had maybe a separate non-PowerPoint. I thought you had like a hard copy of it. But I'm sorry. I thought
Lisa,
you were
could you
running
just
it.
change the font in those boxes to a
Yeah,
different color?
that might do it. Yeah, if not, I'll just
You know what? You know, I'm sorry. I thought you were running it, and I just figured you had a copy of it.
Right.
But you have you're running it, so let's keep it moving. Sorry.
So,
I just screwed everything up.
So
It's all good.
Phase one
Yeah,
is the
that would be
eligibility period, in which our eligibility is determined, and the MSBA invites us to a feasibility study. Step 2 is forming the project team, which includes the OPM and the designer, and this is approximately where we find ourselves right now. Phase 3 is the feasibility stage. We develop a building program, what activities and classes and facilities we will need to run the building. We lay out the existing conditions, and we talk about, we evaluate alternatives for what we're looking for. Phase 4 is when we go to schematic design. We create a design narrative and we develop schematic drawings. Step 5 is scope, budget, and funding, where we execute a project scope and budget agreement with the MSBA. Stage 6 is design, where we develop the design and move towards construction documents. Phase 7 is construction, which includes building construction and any change orders. Stage 8 is closeout, which includes making final payments, commissioning the building, and conducting an audit. And phase 9 is evaluation, which consists of a post-occupancy evaluation.
Thanks.
So these next slides outline the various procurement steps we'll need to take. First is contracting an owner's project manager. And OPM advises and consults the committee with respect to the design, value engineering, all the things there in that first bullet point. They will monitor the performance of the project as it goes through all the stages. They will help us evaluate the designer, contractors, and subcontractors. They are not themselves, though, designers or contractors on this project. And the primary virtue of an OPM is that they work for us and not for any of the contractors. Their fee is fixed. They are not going to benefit from any increases in the project's cost. So they're only working for us. They can be a city employee if that person is otherwise qualified, but I don't believe we'll be doing that. To procure the OPM, just the next slide. We will form an OPM selection committee, which we have done. We will prepare a request for services, which is what the procurement document that the MSBA has prepared, what they call it. They have a template. We essentially fill it in. We advertise the RFS. We will hold a site visit so that interested parties can come and see. We will receive all the proposals, rank the finalists according to the weighted evaluation criteria, which will be part of the RFS. Conduct interviews with the shortlisted candidates and check their references. We select our preferred candidate, negotiate a fee, and execute a contract. After that,
Anthony, hold on 1 second. Has anyone been solicited? Actually, I can
Totally
use-
accurate.
Okay, has anyone been solicited by an OPM company? Has anyone? Okay. If you may, you probably will. I've had more than a few, and I've directed them to Lisa. I hope that's okay. If not, it's probably good for us all to know. If you should get an inquiry, it should be directed to whom? Are you good, Lisa?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
fine.
I mean-
I have not received it.
Okay. They're out there.
There.
Sorry.
to procure a designer, the city will appoint 3 people to serve on the designer selection panel. The school committee, the superintendent or a designee, and the mayor or a designee will serve. We will prepare a request for designer services, again using the MSBA template, advertise and hold inspection again. The designer selection panel will rank the finalists, and then we will negotiate a fee and execute a contract. Next. So then there will be a long process where we actually create the building program, decide what kind of project we're looking to create, and draft the construction documents. We will need to pre-qualify our contractors so that you may be familiar with this if you've done large projects, but often on construction projects, smaller ones, you just create the documents and then put them out into the world, and whoever responds, you take the lowest qualified bidder. This will have a pre-qualification process before that, so we will know who is interested and qualified to bid before we receive the bids, which is better foreknowledge, but a fair bit more work. So we'll form a pre-qualification committee consisting of the designer, the OPM, and 2 city representatives, prepare an RFQ using a DCAM template, advertise the RFQ. We'll receive their qualifications for both general contractors and any subcontractors, and notify applicants and publicize a notice of who has been pre-qualified. And then after that, we do the actual bidding, which will be an IFB like any other construction project. We will not have to advertise this IFB like others, though. We'll only send it to the pre-qualified contractors and subcontractors. First, there's an earlier deadline for the subcontractors. We'll receive and evaluate those and distribute the list of subbidders to the general bidders. Then we receive the general bidders, which will incorporate, their bids will incorporate the selected subcontractors, and we award the lowest responsible and eligible bidder and execute a contract. So that's a quick overview of the major procurement steps involved here. Any questions?
Thank you. Any questions?
I have more of a public process question maybe that's related to this. So as the OPM committee is on deck to be the first, subcommittee to be really doing work, what constitutes a meeting? When does it need to be public? What can we communicate by way of email, like general ground rules for that kind of stuff?
Well, so that's less of a procurement question, more of a public meeting law question, but my understanding of that is any meetings of the subcommittee will have to be posted just like a meeting of the whole committee. We cannot deliberate over email, so sending back and forth comments about drafts or elements of the RFS would be out of bounds. I believe it would be allowed for everyone to take the template and send any suggestions just to me and not to the entire subcommittee. But if going back and forth, that could constitute serial deliberation, which I believe would be a public meeting law violation, which is not a subject I'm an expert in, so I'm open to correction on that. But in general, we'll be creating this RFS in public meeting sessions, and it would not be a surprise if interested OPM firms attend.
My only suggestion would be, how many people on the
5.
committee?
5, including me.
5 including you? So
I think it's Jenna, Betsy, Paul, and Matt.
anytime any more than 3 of you, that constitutes a
Right.
quorum.
Yeah.
So that would be when it have to be posted and it would have to be out there. So if you have any questions about that, always err on the side of caution and call legal and say, be one thing if you were getting together with one other member to brainstorm and over coffee or something, that's one thing. But also, once you get a quorum, that sets you into the open meeting.
Other questions?
I have one. So how can we ensure transparency, fairness, cost effectiveness in selecting vendors for the construction process, while also prioritizing local businesses in the community for community involvement?
We are, frankly speaking, going to have difficulty prioritizing local businesses in a procurement like this. It is not given to us the discretion to make a preferential award based on their geographic location. Everyone will be awarded, we evaluate their qualifications, and then we take the lowest qualified bidder. So we will not really be able to give any kind of local preference in that regard. Likewise for being a minority-owned or women-owned business, we cannot give a preference to someone based on their demographics, whether they're awarded a contract. What we'll have to do is ensure that our outreach efforts are maximum so that people are aware of these opportunities.
But I think we can prescribe a percentage of WB.
I believe in the RFS, yes, there's where you have the weighted award criteria. There are, but not in construction.
Not in construction, but I thought, I've seen MWB goals in construction contracts and procurement.
So there are, there is the possibility to have an MBE or WBE goal. That can be fulfilled by being a subcontractor. So the state does this sometimes. They will say, a certain percentage of your bid has to go to minority or women-owned businesses, SDO certified businesses, and they can identify they can identify a subcontractor, but they themselves being a minority or women-owned business will not. They'll have to then identify an additional business to make that spend with. They can't just be a women-owned business and then say we're covered.
Right,
They'll
thank
start
you,
to-
yeah. But the subcontractors can fill that.
Yeah, and locally owned businesses, unfortunately, not at all. It's generally not allowed, and there are actually also some jurisdictions have laws that go into effect where if we discriminate against, like Connecticut has such a law, if you discriminate against a Connecticut-owned business, Connecticut will then turn around and not do business with the jurisdiction either. So, yeah, we generally avoid local preferences.
Other questions?
Yes. I think it's going to be over time to have this.
Excellent question. So the OPM, I would imagine would. I'm open to other ideas here. I would think that actually forming the RFS is probably only a matter of a month or so. I don't think it's we already have the committee. We are working from a template. So I think it's probably only a month to actually draft and publicize the thing, and then another month to receive for the deadline for responses, a couple of weeks to conduct the interviews, award. Oh, that's the other thing about the public question. The interviews themselves, since they'll be done with the subcommittee, interviews would also need to be in a public meeting session. Just remember that. So all in all, for the OPM, a couple of months, I would think.
Maybe more. I think when it gets advertised, then there's the selection of the OPMs. I think the MSBA has to also approve the selection of the OPM.
They do.
Yeah. So I think it's probably three plus months.
Yeah, I think when I did it in Amherst, I think it took us like 3.5 months. We were a little slow.
And the OPM helps us with the designer selection,
Mhm.
RFS, so they're sequential, so then we have to do the same process with the design selection.
Yeah, and when you're getting to the designer, you're talking about, after you have the design, you're talking about developing the building program. It's gonna involve a lot of interviews with school personnel, a lot of site visits. So that would be probably the lengthiest part of this process, from the designer to construction documents. Not actually sure.
What was the question?
How long is
the
it?
designer part take?
I think the programming and design could be up to a year.
Designer selection.
Selection.
Yeah, so, again, an RFS has to go out, it has to get published, it has to get published in the central register, then we have to gather the submittals, they have to be reviewed, and then we actually have to get on the schedule for the DSP's meeting, which is still in Boston. Is it still all?
It's still in Boston, and to my knowledge, still in person. So yeah, those three designees will need to travel to Ashburn. Is that where they are?
No. When we're down to.
Oh, they're down. Yeah, they're down.
I wonder if there'd be any value to, because a lot of these questions are around timelines. I wonder if there would be any value. This is always, you're kind of estimating, but maybe like a best case and a worst case scenario mapped out the process.
You need that for your communications subcommittee.
That's why I'm
Co-chair.
asking. That's why I'm asking.
Flow chart.
Yeah, I can develop that.
Okay.
And the
Best
contract.
case, worst case.
And the contract with the architect is negotiable.
Yes.
It's not a fixed fee, and it's also, I don't know, the language is slightly different than the OPMs.
And the OPM will help us with all of that as well.
Yes.
Can't wait for the OPM to come, because all the questions that I can't answer, or we can't answer right now, the OPM will be able to help us, shepherd us through the process, as was mentioned before. They work for us, they work for the city, and so once they're on board, it will help us get through the process, and explain things that I certainly don't have all the answers for right now, so.
Which you have some experience with OPMs.
Oh, yeah, all of that.
So,
That's,
I mean,
we all, Matt.
So-
wrote this, yeah.
There's some folks who have experience in it, so you can, if you have just questions specifically about that, you've got about 10 minutes, so ask away. Any questions specific to the OPM? Okay. Thank you, appreciate it. All right. Moving right along, MSBA update. Dr. Zweig and Lisa.
Yeah, sure. I do want to take a moment to just introduce Chantel Alex Fernandez, who's, I don't think you were at the first few meetings, so I want to welcome you to this
Thank you.
team, and very happy to have you here. You represent North Shore Community Development, is that
Correct.
is that right? Okay. I don't know if there's anybody else that hasn't been introduced before. Okay. It's a big group, so it's hard to keep tabs on where everybody is. Okay, so we just have a few updates, and Lisa, you can chime in too. So since our last meeting, which was in 2023, the biggest thing that's happened since that time is we received a letter from the MSBA with our asking us to certify our enrollment. And they initially came to us with, if we were building a 9 to 12 school, 985 students. If we were gonna build a 7 to 12, 1470, right? That's what they came to us. The mayor and I discussed at the time that we weren't gonna sign that letter because we thought the enrollment, you always wanna try to, I guess I'm being taped here, but you always wanna get the, yeah, I'm being taped. But we're always gonna advocate, and in my experience, we're always gonna advocate for as big a building as we think we should have, as possible. The number that they provided us is, they do a lot for extra above that number, always, because they do realize that with a new building comes, an influx of enrollment. More people like the shiny new object and they come back to the school. So they look at that, when they gave us that number of 985 and 1470, that was, at 85% of the total, sort of capacity that they build the building. But we pushed back and said, we looked at some of the enrollment. Mr. Burns was part of that discussion. And because we felt like we already had 975 students accessing Salem High School daily, that includes students that are coming from Beverly for our CTE programs. That includes students from Salem Prep and from New Liberty who access the CTE programs. And it was our highest enrollment in 10 years. We thought we were already on an upswing, and so we made the case that we felt like that number was not accurate, and that we could see that our enrollment would go up even before the time of construction. And then we also pushed back a little bit on the grade 7 to 12 enrollment. They were looking at some numbers that looked at Bentley before, when it was a charter, so it wasn't actually part of the district-wide enrollment. And so in that course of that conversation, we made the case that actually the number of kids is higher than you think, because Bentley wasn't, when you look at our enrollment over the last decade, for a period of time, Bentley was not part of the Salem Public Schools enrollment. They were considered their own separate charter district at that point. So through the course of the conversation, I wrote an email, we had a meeting with the MSBA, and then they came back to us with an elevated enrollment that we felt more comfortable with, which is 1,000 students for 9 to 12, and then 1,500 for 7 to 12. So that's where we ended up. The mayor and I, at that point, then signed the letter and returned it to the MSBA. We are comfortable with that based on projections that we have. We actually have our own internal database that looks at our enrollment. You can never be 100% sure. And again, that number, they still build a school that's bigger than 1,000 students because they do recognize, or bigger than 1,500 students because they do recognize that there should be some room for error in that number. So that's where we're at right now. In order to get on the board meeting for February, which is important to, that we move into feasibility, we had to have the enrollment certified. Once that was certified, we are now going to the February 28th board meeting. And by we, I'm not sure exactly who we is, but I assume me, the mayor, probably our state reps, if the co-chairs would like to be there as well. And it's just it's part of the process for us to move from the initial period into feasibility. And at that point, it allows us to advertise for the OPM, but that's a step that needs to happen first. And so that is happening, I guess that's a Wednesday, is that a Wednesday? Wednesday, February 28th, from 10 to 12. It is on Zoom. I think it is a public meeting.
They did say that they would send the invitation a week in advance.
Okay.
So I'm expecting that next Wednesday, the 21st, we should be hearing,
Okay.
and it will be set up on Zoom.
Okay. Did I leave anything out, Lisa, about the eligibility?
No, actually, I mean,
Okay.
all the eligibility deliverables, like it says, are in, and we really want it. What will happen after that meeting is that they'll probably walk me through what the next set of deliverables are in terms of the OPM and what next steps are. She called it an orientation, so.
Are there any questions that folks have about this, where we're at? This is what's happened between our last meeting and today. Len, I don't know if you want to add anything about the enrollment or.
No, that was a lengthy meeting, debate, and we did have to provide a lot of evidence as to the movement of kids and where schools last 3 years, and how enrollments essentially increased from low point of 798 3 years ago to this year where it's at 950 kids.
Right. And we wanted to make a very strong case that the access to these facilities are not just for the kids that go here. We have new students in Liberty, we have students at Salem Prep. They don't really count, they won't let us count Beverly students, although the fact is that they're utilizing the facility, and we receive resources from those students to access CTE programs. We're also utilizing the space for our adult education programs that Mario has launched now. And so, all of those things have to be in considerations, and that's why we pushed as much as we could to include the fact that we do have more kids accessing the building, young people accessing the building than what our stated enrollment is. And again, we hope that the trend continues. It would be a good problem to have for us to get to 1,000 students, which we hope that we're on an upward trajectory. And I certainly think we'll get there once people know there's a brand new building coming. And I hope more and more students are choosing Salem High School, which we have seen that happen over the last few years, and we hope that trend continues. Sure.
On the 28th for that meeting, are we making a presentation, or they're just voting?
They're voting. They're voting.
We're there to answer questions if they have them?
They may have a question. It's a little pomp and circumstance, from what I understand, but we have provided them with all the information.
Okay.
And the MSBA is making a recommendation to their board to allow Salem to move forward.
So it's 975 students accessing daily, but what's the number of Salem students that are enrolled in the high school now? I'm just curious.
It's like 950.
950.
950.
It goes up every day. It goes up
Goes
and
up
down
and
every
down.
day.
Right.
But,
So
But it's like
about
give or take
950.
60 or 70.
So we're enrolling about 950 kids.
Okay.
And then there's, we have, I think, we have 15 kids from, 12 from Beverly, is that right, Mara? 9, and then we have from New Liberty. There's like 3 or 4 or 5 kids.
So we have about 8 or 9 students in exploratory from New Liberty and so on.
So I know it's a small number in Beverly, and they said they won't count them, but are they spending more time in the Salem Public School System than the Beverly Public School System?
No.
No? Okay, then that makes sense. I guess.
Go ahead, Mark.
The reason why they don't count that as Salem enrollment is that Beverly is the one that is able to report those students as Chapter 74 students, because they're in the Chapter 74 program with us. We then charge Beverly for them.
That's okay. Okay by me. Did they delineate, CTE students versus non-CTE students in the enrollment?
No, they did not. No, they did not. They have asked us a few questions about our CTE wishes, and we don't have, I think, final confirmation we requested for 10 programs, is that right, Mario? But I don't know if the plan is to, whether they've confirmed that they're gonna move forward with those 10 programs.
I don't think that's something that they choose. I mean, we've identified the 2 programs we wanted.
Well, we wanted to add 2 more
They
programs.
clarified which,
Yeah.
and that was my mistake. I called it biomanufacturing or biomedical instead of biotechnology, which was, they came back with, that's not a Chapter 74 frameworks, which is true. I incorrectly named the program, but that is the reason why they came back with that. So welding and biotechnology is the programs that we can move forward with.
What I guess I don't know is I know we have the programs we already existing, whether they have already confirmed that they've approved adding additional programs.
That's what it is, yeah, they talk a lot about feasibility, and again, it comes down to numbers, how many students you have between these programs, and they essentially, they do the math, and they tell you yay or nay, like, do we believe you can fill these programs, because we're not gonna build these spaces if mathematically you can't fill the program.
But if Salem chose to, couldn't you, I mean, we wouldn't be reimbursed for it, but we can do added programming if we.
Okay, that's why I strategically called for certain programming, like welding and manufacturing was the one program that we would need infrastructure for, and real estate space within a building for, where biotechnology is a program where I can leverage classroom space with minimal lab space for certain lab activities without creating too much of a demand on MSBA as well, so, or on our budget in that case, if we were to proceed on our own.
Anything, Lisa, do you wanna move through? Okay. And so, yeah, I'm taking you guys up for this next section, so I'll pass it back over to you.
Okay.
Any other questions about where we are in the process?
OPM selection. So, as I mentioned a minute ago, Matt, who stepped out, this is son, Jenna, Paul, and Betsy all volunteered to be on the OPM selection committee. I know Anthony wants to be part of that. It's critical because he understands all the rules and regs much better than we do. We haven't done much yet, except Lisa sent me the template, so that I can have a look at it, and I sent that out to the group. So I would ask, based on what Anthony told us a minute ago, provide any comments you have directly to Anthony. I will send them back to me, and then we'll probably need to schedule a subcommittee meeting to get together and hash through those, which will have to be advertised. Did anyone feel left out that has changed their mind and wants to be part of the subcommittee? There will be many other subcommittees, as Nate is going to talk about in a minute.
I might just volunteer Lisa to be on the,
Sure.
as a school. Yeah, I just want, Lisa, you're on the committee.
I am.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Quick question, I didn't know where it landed with public meetings. Can these meetings be remote?
I would think so.
It could be.
I'm not sure what our current remote meeting provisions are.
We do have subcommittees for the school committee that are remote. so
Okay.
good.
It'd just be a lot easier than trying to, then we can schedule it a lot easier.
Yep.
I suggest consulting with the city solicitor just to confirm,
Yeah.
Yeah,
since sometimes guidance is evolving on that part.
yeah. And then have a link to a Zoom, yeah. But yeah,
What is the advertisement we have to do? How many days in advance? What's it?
48 hours.
48 hours. Yeah.
But business hours only.
right,
Yeah.
Day of business.
not Sunday
Can't post Friday for
Weekends don't count.
weekends.
or holidays.
Who's gonna post that? Don't we have to post
So Lisa can assist with postings for those meetings. She works with the city on doing that.
So maybe we could make the goal to get, each of us get our comments back to Anthony by the end of next week or something, and then we can schedule something. that's all I have really on OPM. Any questions?
All right, moving right along. So there is such a thing as a communications subcommittee. There's nobody on it but me. And I'm a really nice person, so I don't know if it's, people don't like me, no. So seriously, we are looking for some folks to serve on a communications subcommittee. Similar to OPM, we're looking for probably 5 members, although I'm not, if there are more who are interested, that's fine. I really would like to start getting some stuff out there to the public so they know we're such a thing and we're moving forward and making progress on this. Every once in a while, someone will say, hey, I see you on the, the village, the school building committee. What's going on? So rather than these one-offs, I'd like to have the committee so we can get some stuff out. I think the timeline thing would really be great because that's something that we can share publicly as well. Again, it's best case and worst case. So.
And you do have a member.
I do.
Chris O'Donnell.
Well, our
Well, he's
communications
a
director,
communications director.
he's got to be.
Yeah, that's true. He has no choice, quite frankly. So our communications director will serve on it, but I'm looking for other committee members. Again, it's not a heavy lift. I actually think the work is.
Can we do that remotely?
I'm sorry?
Can we do that remotely?
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. I don't think it's a heavy lift. Again, I think it's going to be exciting because we get to promote the work that's going on. So,
I definitely would like to put my name in, just because in the role of getting lots of questions, so I feel
Exactly.
like coming with the FAQ,
wonderful.
being able to communicate that out.
I would tune in.
Megan, okay.
Emily?
Emily,
So,
no?
We got a lot going on.
If you raise your hand, even if you raise your hand and ask a question, we're assuming that means you want to join us. We want to make sure.
Sure, yeah, why not?
Bob? All right.
As long as it's remotely.
It'll be remote. Bob McCarthy, add Bob to that. Am I
Sure.
just reading off the names so we make sure we capture everyone?
Kate and Chris, Megan, Yonley, Keith, Chantel, and Bob.
And Glenn, what's his name?
So glad I did.
Yeah, you kind of want an odd number, but that's all right. We like you. Go ahead.
What's going on, or did you want Mrs. Taylor?
No, he raised his hand.
We'll be gentle. All right? All right.
He's got a lot of other things.
I know he does. I know. And again, I'm not, we're all busy. This is not our full-time job, so I'll be mindful of that when we meet. They won't be frequent. And a lot of stuff we may be, well, actually, we can't do stuff over email because it's a subcommittee, but, the meetings will be monthly at the most, Okay?
Yeah, what's great about that is Chris can take anything you design or want to push out there. That's part of his day job. He can get that out there to the community. Just don't hit reply.
I appreciate everyone's willingness to
Do you
join.
want me to do an email with all of your members and to get
That
you
would be
started?
fabulous. Thank you. Nice. All right. That's all I got.
Okay.
So, are you subbing for the mayor?
I'm subbing for the mayor. So I would love I'd love this to be a little discussion amongst the group. The mayor, and I feel strongly as well, that we need to have a student on this, on the building committee, at least one. And would love to get people's thoughts about, and I think Laura, you brought this up too. And we're fortunate that Laura is here who can help access students for sure. But I'd love to hear from the committee, like what kind of process we might want to, first of all, if you want a student, which I'm assuming the answer would be yes, but then what process to recruit somebody, what grade level, do we make them fill out something expressing their interest, or we review applications? I just want to put that out to you because we'd like to get a student as soon as possible on that building.
Bob?
I guess my first question, I think it's a great idea, would be, and no disrespect to anybody who's graduating this year, is like, that wouldn't be helpful. You almost want to target, you got to try to figure out what class you're trying to target, because they're going to be part of the process. Not that the person may lose interest, but you would hope that if you identify the right student, maybe someone like a sophomore who's been at the high school for a while, that can move through the next couple of years in the process. I mean, a lot of us have signed up, and we all know that this isn't a 6-month, 1-year thing. This is a multi-year process. So I would think that you'd want a student And sometimes it's hard when you're looking at a sophomore, so maybe it's a junior, but you want someone who's got some perspective that can, isn't just gonna be every year you're trying to bring someone out new up to speed. So I'd be open to suggestions, but I would think that at minimum, I would think someone who next year's gonna be a junior, so that you get them started now, they're in the sophomore year now, then you get them through the junior and senior year. Or I don't think we wanna go back to someone, if we go to the 7 through 12 one, I don't think we wanna start with someone way back in the middle school, but I think that makes more sense to try to pick someone out that's maybe a sophomore now that can work through for the next year or two. That's just my opinion.
Go ahead. You have a question?
My question is like, can he be a former student? Somebody that have been a Salem High School graduate?
See, I was actually thinking a senior who can tell us what's gone well and what's not going well, and a sophomore.
Right.
But a recent grad, a fairly recent grad, someone who knows the building, argument can be made that a sophomore maybe doesn't know the building as much, but a senior would, or a recent grad. So I don't know why we have to limit it to one. I would like
It doesn't
two.
have to be, yeah.
I would like someone who knows the building who can tell you whether, what some of the challenges are, and then someone who can grow with the process, to your point, Bob.
It is good to the mechanical, past, future, present.
Right.
You get all the inputs. Almost like their own little subcommittee.
I would,
No, I was just saying, they have 3 months left.
Yeah.
Senior.
Oh, damn, yeah. Okay,
Stay with us for 3 months.
Yeah, you're probably right.
I would think you want some sort of, something where they can feel like it was a process that they could participate in, nothing onerous, but, that they felt was open invitation. It wasn't just like somebody selected and, they got some sort of process that, was visible to the high school community.
I like the idea of them writing like a one page, like
Yeah.
a paragraph about why this is something to understand, or why it's important to them, or why.
I just, as an example, I just I shared with students an application to be part of the superintendent's advisory group. And I did ask a series of questions, and I think we got almost 20 students responding. And they wrote really thoughtful responses, and I'm gonna have to figure out how to but, I don't think it's a lot to ask at least one question. Maybe we want to discuss what that question is that we want to ask, but I think we'll get responses from students who want to be a part of it. But I really defer to all of you about how many students, what question to ask. I think, and we send a blast out to all the students, and then I'm sure, Laura, you might be able to help promote it within the school.
What are you hearing now, Laura?
I'm sorry,
What are you hearing now? Are students really saying anything?
around a new building.
Yeah.
They're a little upset that they won't be here for a new building. I can tell you that, they've been very vocal. It depends on who you talk to. They're excited, they feel that it's time. Some of them are very frustrated with a lot of different aspects of our building, whether the no heat or the technology is sketchy sometimes, not sketchy, but isn't.
Not as reliable as it should be.
It's not as reliable, and so the kids are frustrated, and, they love, to be sitting in a classroom that, and I know the grant this doesn't cover furniture, but
No, it
more
does.
comfortable.
No, it does.
Oh, it does, sorry, I misunderstood. But they're very excited.
I would think it'd be, it kind of cues me into an interesting question. I think you have to kind of frame what this committee's role is and this project a little bit. But I think it's almost like, what is it, it's almost like that student is not going to get the advantage, right? They're not going to see the building built while they're in high school, right? So it's like, how would they approach that? Like, what can they contribute, and how, so that, I'm not phrasing it well, but, how do you see yourself contributing to something that you won't be here to, you know what I mean? Take.
I think
Right.
we're actually in the best position to
Right.
answer those kinds of questions.
Yeah, but it's like, how do you envision your contribution toward a project that's 5 years down the line, or something?
I would imagine, had it been me at
Yeah.
that age, now an architect, somebody in Mario's CTE program, might be interested in it, simply because they're
Yeah.
interested in.
So I was actually just talking to Glenn about, we have a student, female student in electrical who is really dedicated to CTE and to Salem High School and has done tremendous effort in sharing the word about CTE. I think she'd be a great person to add to the committee. I would invite Elise to the committee.
This is a little bit off topic, but when you just said electrical, thinking about there are all these opportunities with other potential funding sources for certain components of the project that actually tie into things like electrical work. And so when you just mentioned a student that might be interested in that, not only would it be potentially someone who has an interest there, but there could be certain components of the project that could actually be very intriguing for them if that's an area of interest for them, separately from just contributing to their community as a whole.
And I would actually, certainly I would welcome everyone's feedback, but I would actually kind of defer to like a Rory and a Mario. Those folks who are in the building, who know the students best, you know, if you have some ideas on, you know, what the ideal student or students would be. I mean, again, I don't want to exclude anyone else, but you're in the building, you know the students.
I mean, I think it's critical for students that are gonna have, I mean, seniors are kind of, I mean, not to say useless, we would obviously want them to be.
They're gone. They're already like,
we want students that are gonna experience a high school with the understanding that there's a new high school coming. So, and that are interested in providing feedback on their experience. And again, that's not to say that seniors aren't able to do that, but they don't really understand that there's a new high school coming. If you took a poll of most of our seniors, most of them probably don't even know that we're talking about this right now. So I think it's critical to have the feedback of students that have knowledge of what's coming down the pipeline and are going to have the experience of going through this building in the process of creating a new building. So 8th to 10th, 11th grade are going to be really critical pieces of information.
With regards to, I mean, you brought up an interesting point with this dedicated electrical student. When we look at the potential for a new high school and the CTE program, what percentage of the building do you think will be, you said you could like leverage certain aspects of the program in classroom space. What percentage of the new building do you envision will be dedicated towards CTE?
All of it.
There you go.
All of it. I want cross-curricular activities across the whole building. I want my electrical department to be with our science and chemistry department. And I'm not saying that my electrical teacher is going to go teach in the chemistry classroom or the science classroom, but I want there to be interconnected activities between the two programs. I want science, kids that are not in CTE that are just taking science or math or whatever their pathway is, to have an experience in a CTE program. And that doesn't mean that they're going to be electricians, but they understand what the components are. So I really do envision true integration amongst all.
Yeah, not like this CTE and the other one is core academics. Or I think we're moving beyond that now. Teachers are planning medical assisting and their tools used in our biomed path. I think that is the connection and thinking more through the lens of immersive activities and what we want our kids to be doing versus boxes like you need to pass this class, this class, and this class. Here's the things we want you to create, and this is the space we're doing to create those things.
So I don't want to overcomplicate this, so why don't we do this? Why don't we have Rory, Mario, Glenn, anyone else in the building? Just think about, you know, is it one, Z, is it one student, two students, what grades, and then get back to us. Will that work?
So that's what works for me. Yeah, and I mean, it would be great if we could get them at the
Yeah,
next meeting.
I would say ideally, we want to get them at the next meeting, if we can.
It's not vital now, but I would just think about like if we're assuming that they're sort of phasing out, like to the idea of like a recent graduate, like is that part of the deal? Or if there's a junior who's still interested and wants to stay on as a senior, like do they stay on when they graduate from high school? Are they staying on, or is the idea that we're constantly, like I don't, again.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a
but-
preference. If someone is that really involved and engaged,
Right.
why would you want to keep
Right.
on? I mean, there's no limit to the number that we can have. You know, we went on unwieldy, but there's no limit. So,
Sure.
yeah, I think we're flexible. So, yeah, I mean, why don't we, if you identify some students and I don't know if you want to, is there going to be a question? I do like the idea of some kind of question that we need to answer. And then we're talking, our next meeting is in March, so trying to turn this around quickly, and then invite them to the next meeting.
I think the important question would be, how has the school affected you academically, you know, whether it's positive or negative in your 3 years here? Kind of, you know, range, engage, you know, get a better understanding.
As far as I'm concerned, you four, you tell us. You tell us what the question should be, with the grades, what grades they should be in, and,
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
yeah. You know the students better than we do, I mean.
That's right.
I guess knowing that these people are in the building every day, and they know the students obviously better than we do, that, and, you know, we meet on a Thursday night at 6:30, so, and sometimes that, what if they, because I don't, are we looking to add one voting member to this group, or how's that gonna work? And maybe they have their own like subcommittee, and they meet during school hours and do their thing during school hours, and they send one representative to us rather than trying to send, you know, 4 individuals to us. If they identify a group of 4, 6 kids, whatever many kids it is, they meet, they talk about it amongst themselves, you know, as part of whatever building, and then have their own little subcommittee, and then they have one person who comes to a meeting and then reports to us based on the feedback that they get, because they're in the building all day. They can talk to their friends, they go to, you know.
And that feedback, that student committee could have freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors, and have one representative that could carry us through 3 or 4 years.
Right. They vote on the representative to come to the meeting, because there may be conflicts. They may be on a sport team or some other team or something that presents a conflict with someone else in the group may not, and they can come and, you know, occupy a chair here with us. We're right here next to Nate.
Good information for us to know.
Yeah.
I mean, I think on the voting member, I think that's, like, I'm not a voting member. The way we did it is if you don't live in Salem, you're not a voting member. So some people around the table are not voting members. You can decide, though, to have the student be a voting member. But I do think having 1 or 2 students be here at every meeting and their voice just be present, I would, you know, it'd be great if you do go with more than one, like that we have, diverse representation is important. You know, want to have the perspectives of, we're a very diverse community, how can that be reflected on, on this board? But then to Bob, your point, there are going to be plenty of opportunities where we're going to want students to, like larger numbers of students to weigh in on different things that we're deciding. So, having subcommittees that these student leaders kind of help us collect the information about different designs, furniture, what have you. That's going to be important as the project rolls along. But I think it'd be great if we could have a student or 2 be here at every meeting, just so to check the adult voices here.
Spoken is a quality.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, outspoken. Yeah.
And when, I work at Salem State, we make these decisions.
You're right.
The grown-ups are making this decision, and there's never a student in the room. It's like, you gotta have a student in the room. So, yeah, I agree. Okay. So, Glenn, Mario, Z, Lori, and so you can feed all your information through Lisa, and she can, sorry, Lisa. Actually, I'm not really sorry. I'm just saying. Okay. Anything else on?
No, on that, just on the next item, I guess this is maybe a homework assignment because of, I would love to do, so as folks know, the feasibility is going to look at 2 different options, a 7 to 12 or a 9 to 12 school. We haven't, and what's really, people in the community think the decision's already been made. I hear people saying, oh, you've already decided you're building a 7 to 12. There was you heard a couple of weeks ago or a couple of meetings ago from the consultant that worked with us on the master plan. And there was a lot of input at the time that people did want us to consider looking at a 7 to 12 option. That being said, that was two years ago, and I do think we have to think about re-engagement and engagement with our community, like concurrent to the feasibility study happening, which will look at, literally the feasibility of building, a bigger building on this site or a smaller facility, and what it would look like, how viable it is, all of those things. But they're not going to do a community engagement process. I think we have to think about what that process would be, and this is tied in obviously to the communications subcommittee, but I think we're going to have to host some meetings and talk to families, talk to teachers, talk to students, and different parts of Salem. Like I don't want the same voices at the table who always come to the microphones, but to really maybe do some focus groups around this again. And so I would love for maybe the homework assignment is to think about what a process might look like over the next, I don't know, how long is feasibility? Look into the,
The whole feasibility could be 5-6 months.
starting in,
After the design is selected, so that's about
5 to 6 months from now.
okay, so we basically have like a year of time or a year and a half of time. So I think that's probably means that we start sometime in the summer, this fall, starting to engage people. But if you bring your ideas, I'd love to do some breakouts, get people moving around here or off the tables to really start like maybe putting some ideas on paper of what that process can look like. I do think we're gonna run into obviously pushback at people, and rightfully so. People don't feel like they can weigh in. And we're gonna be looking for this committee to help make a recommendation. The school committee, I believe, ultimately needs to make would have to vote on a grade configuration change. I believe that's what would happen, but this committee would obviously make a recommendation to them around what direction we want to go with the either 9 to 12 building or 7 to 12. That's all they're studying. They're not studying an 8 to 12. They're not studying a 6 to 12. They're studying a 9 to 12 and a 7 to 12 facility. They made that very clear. That's the two things that they will study based on what our proposal was.
In the feasibility study, some of the concepts, and I just think this is important in the clarification, is it doesn't necessarily have to be one building. You can think of it as like a complex with some shared facilities, some not. And I think that's important because for some people having it all in one building versus some form of separation, whether that be within kind of one building or if it kind of is on a site and things like that. So I think that can help us with that conversation, that nuance. And it may be something we need like visuals to help people understand ideas.
So I think, what's missing here is the critical people like the OPM and the designer, because not only is that a question that will be looked at from a physical aspect, it will be looked at it from a cost perspective, it will be looked at from a communication and community perspective, because all of those things aren't linear, they're all crossing each other. Often during that feasibility study, they have to.
Right.
I mean, I think we have to demand that it is from our OPM and our designers so that that kind of information can get looked at very carefully. And we can suggest, I think, processes because we know the community well. But I think those, the OPM certainly with the designer and this committee can orchestrate a lot of meetings surrounding if it's this, if it's that. And so that we're not looking on these linear paths, because that's where we get into problems, because we can convince ourselves to one path and then be disrupted when the price comes in or the literally can't fit on this site. Or, so I think that's the complexity. That's what I enjoy, the complexity about that, the answer to that question.
I'm thinking of the 7 to 12. I don't have this, but the impact, so if you go 9 to 12, you're kind of staying the course. But if you go 7 to 12, now you're impacting the entire district, really. And so you've got to think about that, because now you've got to get other schools involved, because now they have to reconfigure their grade level. So I'm not saying that in a good or bad way, I'm just saying the implications of a 7 to 12 in, it's gonna involve a lot more conversations with a lot more people, which is probably a good thing, but.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think there's some, part of that master plan that we heard about also talked about having a early childhood center and, thinking about having sixth grade stay potentially in the elementary schools. Those are all considerations that, independent of what, well, not independent, it's all related, but those are things that the community has also talked about as well that factor in to this decision. Ultimately, I think we have to do what we think is best for the grades, for this grade span, this 7 to 12, whether it's, staying the course with the 9 to 12 or, and then the middle school option we have now. And to Jenna's point, there's a lot of ways that you can look at how a facility can be, built, and there's the fiscal implications as well. All those things, we have to discuss. I guess what I would love to, and you're right, not until, we won't get a lot of the information and the context until a little longer ways out, but thinking about what a process could look like, I would really want to use the fact that we have people here that represent different factions of the Salem community. Think about what would be a thoughtful, intentional process that would involve all stakeholders, and like mapping what that would be like, and then we will have content to share with them, but at least we'll be thinking about organizing ourselves in a way that solicits input from all the voices, because this is a huge,
I would argue that this is probably gonna be, I agree with you 100%, the more voices the better. This will probably be the most controversial decision this group will make.
Right.
And so as long as we say we had input from many sources, and, we made a decision based on that and other factors, we can sleep at night. But to your point, if there's no input outside of this room, we'll have some problems.
Yeah, in combining those comments with Paul said, I think if we can articulate, these are all the groups that you're gonna meet with to the designer, that's what we want in the request for services from the designer. Because I would wanna see the finalists we select in their proposal, they articulate, this is how we engage communities. These are the processes we use. This is how we do it. We do virtual, we do online surveys, we do in-person workshops, we do evening meetings, we do town halls. Like, I would want to see how those design teams engage communities. We need to tell them who they're meeting with, but, I want them to articulate what that process looks like. And we want to shortlist those firms that we're like, yeah, that's the one we want.
So do you think this is valuable at this point?
I think it's valuable for us to think about, like, who are all these constituents that, because we need to articulate that in the RFP. You're gonna, part of your design, part of your services are going to be 7 to 12, 9 to 12. You're gonna meet with all these people.
So there are two opportunities to look at the experience about how people help us get that information. The first is the RFS and how they respond to it, because there's a section in the proposal. Most of it is rote, that is, you have to put out who your consultants are, who your team is. There's one section where you can, what we used to call jamming, that you can actually convince the people that are looking at it that you are the right person for this particular job because of this. And then there's a second part, which is during the interview, you're asked, we will develop hopefully several questions that will be given to each one of the designers before they come to the interview process. And they will come back and respond specifically to those questions, and one of those questions certainly should be, or could be that. But having this discussion before all of that is really critical, because we want to make sure that we, discuss together what we think might be avenues that they might consider, so they're not just giving us, well, at Marlboro we did this, and at Hingham we did this, because we're Salem and it's different. It has to be focused on us.
I would just also suggest that very robust community engagement will be really critical, so that ultimately when it comes time to pay for the project, that there's been as much participation in that, so that it's as known and there's been as much buy-in and engagement from the folks that would then be, that would be impacting what their tax bills likely look like. And so presuming that they would have been hopefully engaged in quite a bit of the process all along and providing input to that process, hopefully will help when that conversation ultimately, assuming it gets to that point, will presumably will get to that point about having conversation about how to pay for.
Steve, would you like us to, so the next meeting, the agenda item is to give you feedback about what we think the process or example?
Yeah, and the stakeholders, I think, as well. Like a process and stakeholder, that would be great.
Everybody hear that? Your homework assignments?
I guess one person to you, Dr. Drake. I mean, obviously, there's only two choices in front of us, 9 to 12 or 7 to 12. And you guys have already done some legwork prior. What kind of, what if you've, thought about 7 to 12 up here at this facility? How does that impact, have you already looked at how that may potentially impact the rest of the district with regards to early childhood?
Yeah.
Like all the middle school gonna phase itself out, going K to 6 at all the rest of the schools?
So the master facility plan did a lot, did that, and I mean, it is very possible for us to, we have some thoughts about the idea of having an early childhood center, shifting the elementaries to 1 to 6s, and then having a 7 to 12. That being said, there seemed to be a lot of energy around that, but it wasn't universal. And I do think that this is not without controversy. And there's going to be, remember, we also have a K to 8 school here at Saltonstall. They're pretty proud of that model, of that school. So there's got to be a lot of discussion about this. I know the school committee is concurrently having conversations about the inter-district choice, which is also somewhat tied into this because of the way that we don't have neighborhood schools. So there's a convergence of things here that are, the time to do this would be when you decide to bring a new school online. And so, I think there's a lot of ways you can go, but this is the moment for Salem to really make a decision about how we want the next generation to go for schooling. And that's why I do think it's great we're getting the new building, but it's also a prime opportunity to really talk about these things.
So I guess my follow-up question to that would be, is it this group's decision to do that engagement to come up with a model for which way we want to go for high school, whether it's one or the other? Wouldn't that be a school committee decision?
Yeah, ultimately, the school committee will have to vote on that, but this committee is going to have to make a recommendation too, based on like the financials, because cost is a factor too. So if it costs an insane amount to build a 7 to 12, and it doesn't make financial sense for us to do that, then that may be off the table. So I think it's this committee making a recommendation to the school committee, and the school committee considering all the public input, and you are all stakeholders here. You represent the city, so that's where I think it's going to lie. And there's school committee members who feel strong with it. Ultimately, it is their decision. Yeah.
Totally concur with that, and I would think that they would go to, we've asked Anthony to come up with a flow chart would be, it's nice that we're gonna have an engagement, we're gonna do our due diligence, but at what point in that flow chart would that decision have to be made which way we're going? Because you don't wanna keep kicking the can down the road until, oh yeah, we think we've done all our due diligence through the whole process and started working with the design team and everybody to come up with whichever model we think is best, and all of a sudden, it goes to the school committee and they think the other way. So now we gotta go back. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I was going to ask, to follow on Bob's point, is it in our remit to just provide the data points to the school committee to say, if it's 7 to 12, these are the pros and cons, if it's 9 to 12, these are the pros and cons, this is the cost, and they do the vote? And the follow-up question that would be, for the designer under the MSBA guidelines, you're supposed to study a renovation, an addition, and a new build. Are they studying each one of those for 7 to 12 and 9 to 12? Are we making that decision at some point earlier in the process?
At the end of feasibility study. At the end of feasibility study, I believe we have to vote on which what scenario we want so that we can be admitted into schematic design. Otherwise, we don't move out of feasibility to feasibility continues.
So when does the school committee go into that process?
It would have to be before feasibility.
Okay.
Remember, we have a school committee member on this committee, right? So. See?
That's what I wanted to say, feasibility would have to, design would know which way they're going so they can move forward with the design. So that's something like that.
So on the flow chart, step 4 is schematic design, step 3 is evaluate alternatives. So I'm asking where on the flow chart it would be in step 3 where that decision would need to be made. Now, the MSCAPA process doesn't account for going to the school committee, going back to the school committee for that decision. As far as the MSBA is concerned, the decision is here. But obviously there's a reality of who we need money for.
What schools around here have 7 through 12? Is there any, like, I don't know any high?
There are.
There's a lot, yeah.
Triton.
Triton, yeah, okay.
Saugus, that's right.
Saugus is 7 through.
That's Manchester,
Essex? Is it
yeah, the
Manchester?
new Saugus building is 7.
All right, so, okay.
Masconomet, yeah, thank you. So there's a couple of,
So there'll be more kids coming into the school,
if that's the direction.
other high school, all right.
Yeah.
I just want, when we did the master plan, it was kind of coming out of the pandemic time, so that was a challenge. But I think this is a good homework assignment because it was very hard. We had good engagement, we had very thoughtful engagement, but the numbers, we definitely, I think, we have to, any creative ideas, people, and I love that this committee is very diverse and voices in different parts of Salem and the larger community. People in Salem working hard, they have family obligations, they have a lot going on, getting community input can be difficult sometimes. And as you say, the same people sometimes show up, but we're trying to get some other voices to that. So just any creative ideas. It was, harder than we thought it would be to get, I think, a lot more input. And so I think nowadays with the ability to have more virtual is an added benefit because you can grab people who can't just come to a meeting. They just can't do that. So, but I think it's a good challenge.
I do want to be mindful of time because one thing we have not allowed for is say 5 to 10 minutes of public comment. So because we do have some folks in the audience, so we have to make it as a meeting. We need to allow for some public comment. Go ahead.
No, it's just not like, so I'm listening to the conversation and I almost walked. So I don't know like how much conversation has been happening around engagement. But I think the first question is, I heard that engagement almost have to happen before the third step in the chart flow. So we wouldn't have necessarily a year. I don't know like the time frame for that, but we wouldn't have enough time to have an equitable process for engagement if it's only if it's not a year. If we are thinking to do, to your point around like challenges, I feel like this is happening across the board with like engagement, because it's like if you add digital access and digital competency, a lot of families might not have the resources to participate in some of these meetings. And so like, how far do we go with engagement part in order to reach those families? And I think effective community engagement is really thinking about different layers. Not just 1 or 2, but really like creating almost a movement where everybody feels like they're part of something. And so I'm extremely interested in like what we can come up with.
And then you'll be helpful as part of our homework assignment because you'll have some. I've been in this community for a long time, and there have been times when you meet students where they are, you meet families where they are. So we were going to them to get feedback, and we have translators in the whole 9 yards. Those are the kinds of things we're going to have to consider, for sure. If we want, and I know we do, we want community input, so we've got to meet them where they are.
Our schools are scattered throughout the week, so you also go meetings at different various sites.
We also, the other thing we have right now is we do have bodies that meet pretty regularly that are connected to the schools we have a multilingual language group of families that meets with our special education group. I have a parent advisory group that's very diverse. We've got to just think about how we use existing structures and then you know, that's why, but I also want it, there's also, this is not just about the families, there's also community members that, so you were saying before, Anna was saying, like, you know, the voters have to support, you know, are gonna have to get behind this project, at, you know, at some point. So we're gonna wanna, you know, the senior centers, you know, the seniors are gonna wanna engage. We have to think about it. It's a pretty robust conversation. So I know I'm gonna miss folks, and so that's why, please, you know, give us we need the exhaustive list.
Yeah, so like what you're describing is an asset mapping, like who should be
Exactly,
involved?
exactly.
Who are the stakeholders? And it's literally just creating a list and doing a strategy around that list. Like, what is the best sign? What would they need? So, yeah. I almost feel like the school committee is a stakeholder in the process, because they're gonna be making the decision.
Again, mindful of time, any last comment before I open it up for, actually, no, I'm gonna do public comments. I think we're good. So we're gonna allow 5 to 10 minutes for public comments. This would be your opportunity. Everyone's good? If you want us to speak, you just come up and state your name. There's a microphone right there. If not, you good? Anything? Oh, you good? All right, so yeah, Lisa, we just have to make sure we add to the agenda, like 10 minutes for public comment.
You prefer to do that at the end of the meeting, you think?
Yeah, because if you do it at the beginning, sometimes it gets a little, trust me.
Yeah, you
Any final comments before we?
The presentation though was earlier where we couldn't read the area that was shaded. Can we get that email to everybody so we can blow it up, look at it, see what the exact?
Is everyone, I mean, we might want to resend the link. We got, you know, all kinds of Google Docs, right? You might want to just send that link out to remind folks that everything we're presenting and all that stuff is, yeah, we have a group page on the website too. So.
Awesome.
Okay. This is a good meeting. You know, it's funny because it's going to be a long process, and I'm thinking to myself, you know, we got to really start engaging. This is
You want a
really
shelf?
good. No, I'm good.
Start digging right now.
Okay, all right. Well, is it going to be 7:12 or 9? No. All right. Motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening.